Hey guys, in this one, I've got a list of 5 really good smartphones under $300 that you can get right now. So these are phones that are pretty much available worldwide. These are some great phones. They're under 300 bucks on Amazon. I will leave all the links to these below and some more information on them as well, so you can go and check out availability and prices in your region. But let's get into the first one, which is from Motorola. We have the Moto G Power, and this ticks a lot of boxes for me. So with this $300 price range, we're gonna have to give up the chipset. It's gonna be a good chipset in this price range, but not the most powerful. But what I really wanna see is a nice big screen, maybe some extra cameras at the back, a big battery, and hopefully a modern design, and the Moto G Power pretty much ticks all of those. So you have a Snapdragon 665 in this phone. It's an 11 nanometer chipset. I would say this chipset gets beaten by all of the other phones in this list. So that is one of the main downsides for the phone, but it's got a lot of upsides. It's got a really big screen with a hole punch selfie camera. So it's a modern design. It looks like a 2020 smartphone. It's got a huge battery, over 5,000 milliamp hours. That's probably gonna last at least 2 days, depending on how you use it, of course, but it's very big, so I like that. You also get a triple camera system on the back, so you get a 16 megapixel main sensor, you get an ultra wide camera and a macro camera as well. So there's no zoom camera on this phone. A couple of other phones in the list do have a zoom camera, so if camera zoom is really important for you, maybe go for them. But overall, as a package, this ticks a lot of boxes, and it's actually way under 300 bucks in the States. You also get 4K video recording on this one if you want to step up to that. Maybe the stabilization gets a bit wobbly if you go to that one. 1080p would probably be recommended, but overall the specs are very decent. You have a fingerprint sensor on the back. Not my favorite position. I would prefer it either under the screen or in this price range, possibly on the side. Actually, one phone in this list does have an under screen, and the rest pretty much are side mounted. Moving on though to a Redmi phone, and actually this is kind of 3 Redmi phones. So the Redmi Note 9 Pro, Note 9S, and then Note 9 Pro for Asia. Basically it's the same phone with some little differences here and there depending on which market you're in. But if you're looking for a great value phone with just a ton of specs for this price, then Redmi give that to you. I would say Xiaomi and Redmi really do produce amazing value for money phones in this price range because they offer a ton of specs for the price. The screen is bigger than the Moto G, it's 6.67 inches, and you get a Snapdragon 720G. This is a new chipset for this year. It's 4G, so there's no 5G on here, but it is a new chipset, and it's an 8 nanometer chipset, which up until like last year was like a flagship chipset. So 8 nanometer process is really good. This isn't gonna be as powerful as flagship SoCs right now, but it's solid enough for this phone. You also get 6 gigabytes of RAM, which is really good for this price as well. The phone that I'm looking at, which is the Note 9 Pro, has a quad camera system. 2 of those are macro and depth, so yeah, not the most useful, but you get a high megapixel main image sensor and an ultra wide as well. The selfie camera is 16 megapixels. Megapixels don't matter too much when it comes to the selfie camera, but I like the fact that it's center positioned in a hole punch. It's really modern. I like it in the center rather than off to the side. That's just my personal preference. You also get a side mounting fingerprint sensor, which again, for me, if I'm gonna have it either on the back or the side, I would choose the side. A huge battery as well, 5,000 milliamp hours, and depending on which phone you're getting in which region, it could have either 18, 30 or 33 watt charging. Anything above 18 watt, to be honest, is really good at this price range, and 30 or 33, it's a really good spec'd out phone for the price. Moving on though to a rival of Redmi, the Realme 6 Pro, and just to make you aware, the 7 has actually just been released in, I think, China, maybe rest of Asia, maybe India as well. But in terms of Western markets, you'll be looking at the Realme 6 Pro. If you are in Asia, you may be able to pick up the 7 or 7 Pro that's just been released. The Realme 7 Pro does have some advantages, but the Realme 6 Pro is still a decent phone for me. You get a 90 Hz refresh rate on this screen, so that's just a higher refresh rate than usually, which you get with 60 Hz. It does make the phone feel different, and it actually makes the phone feel faster and zippier. Even though you don't have the most powerful chipset, that 90 Hz screen does change the way that you use it. This phone also has a 720G chipset from Snapdragon, so it goes really head to head with that Redmi Note 9 Pro. This phone really is supposed to rival that Redmi Note 9 Pro, but it is different in a couple of ways. It has a 2x zoom camera on the back, whereas the Redmi doesn't, and it has an extra ultra-wide camera in the front, which the Redmi doesn't have. It also puts it off to the left in a hole punch. Depending on which design that you like, or if you're camera-centric, you might want to choose one or the other. Now the Redmi 7 Pro actually has some really good upgrades over the 6 Pro. It moves to an AMOLED display, which I personally prefer. You got really high quality with AMOLED. There's no high refresh rate though. And also with the 7 Pro, you actually get 65 watt fast charging in that phone, which is crazy for that price. But again, you can live without it. I think the 6 Pro is a really solid phone. Depending where you are in the world, you may want to go for it. Another phone by Xiaomi though, and this time under the Poco brand, is the Poco X3 NFC, which really is made for international markets. This phone is just over $300, I think, on Amazon. Again, I'll put all the links below. Depending on which country you're on, the price might be different, but it's worth putting on this list. This one I would say is a slight specs upgrade to the Note 9 Pro. You're getting a 120Hz refresh rate on that screen, so that is just a great spec, and it does change the way you use the phone. It makes everything feel faster and zippier when you're moving in and out of the system. You get a Snapdragon 732G chipset, so a bit complex. What's the difference between the 720G and the 732G? Well, they're actually both manufactured on an 8nm process, and essentially the daily use that you're going to get out of them won't have any differences, so I wouldn't really worry about it. You also get 4K video recording, a high megapixel main image sensor, an ultra wide, and then a depth and a macro. Again, not the most useful for me. 33 watt charging on this one though is a good spec. So do you get the Redmi Note 9 Pro or the Poco X3 NFC? They are more or less the same phone. There are some slight differences, but they're both going to give you pretty much exactly the same experience when using them. It's going to come down to where you are in the world and which one is available for you. Finishing off the list though, and I really want to put this one in here because it is a brilliant phone, honestly. It's the Samsung A51. Now this is usually well above $300, but there are a few outlets selling this for $300 more or less on Amazon. So go and check those out. Hopefully they are available in your area because this is a great price for this phone. So this phone essentially excels in a couple of areas. The first and most important is the screen for me. It uses a Samsung AMOLED screen, and for me, they just are the best to look at. The colors are amazing. It's an AMOLED, so you get amazing contrast. It's a fantastic screen with a modern design. And then really the next standout feature for me is the cameras, not just the hardware, but also the image processing. I personally just prefer the way that Samsung processes its images. I think they're a little bit more natural than the other brands. Again, that's just down to me and my personal preference though. You get okay specs when it comes to the battery and charging. It's a 4000 milliamp hour battery with 15 watt charging. Does get beaten out by pretty much all the other phones. The chipset as well does get beaten out by a couple of others. It's a 10nm chipset from Samsung. Again, with daily usage, you're not going to notice this difference, but I do have to mention that 10nm chips are just not as powerful or efficient as those 8nm chips. As a package though, for $300, if you can get that phone at that price, I think it's a great deal. But it is a massively tough choice for me. I can't believe how good all of these phones are for $300. You can get amazing deals in this price range. All of these phones have multiple cameras, good screens in one way or another, and big batteries with fast charging, most of them as well. So some great value here. Check out those links if you want to go and view those phones. Other than that, that is it for this one. Thank you for watching. Thumbs up if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one.